Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 32 of my Industrial Revolution 3 playthrough. In this episode, we are going to produce lead and then use that to improve our power system in our factory. Enjoy. Okay, all this is running pretty well, which means we need to make a bunch of room for more. And it ended up being a lot bigger than I was expecting. I was hoping we could just extend it out here, but I don't know, based on its size. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be in a straight line. But for now, let's at least do a second one off to the side here. And who knows exactly how much space we're going to need. But it's probably going to be all of it. So I guess we'll just clear all of this. I am wondering if we should increase the amount of construction robots to also 500. Doing things like cutting down trees does take quite a bit of effort. Let's charge up the robots, and because of their increased battery capacity, it actually takes them quite a bit of time to charge and drop in the inventory. Well, we're up to 700 of our nickel ingots, and of course the number's only going to go higher. So, as a result, we probably should research the things that use nickel now, so we can try to get a handle on that, because our ability to produce copper in the efficient way is dependent on us having room for the nickel. Now, we could do electroplating. That certainly would consume some nickel. But really, at this point, the best place to use it is probably ethanol too. And this is kind of why we did ethanol to begin with, is because we knew we would get here. And nickel lets you do quite a bit when it comes to petrochem. One recipe you get is petroleum processing, which if you add what is essentially a tiny bit of nickel to some petroleum and some steam, you end up getting coke and natural gas, so you can convert petroleum to natural gas. So right now we need natural gas for our furnaces, and we're just burning the petroleum to get rid of it. But if you have nickel, you no longer have to do that you can turn all of the output of the petrochem processing into natural gas, and you'll get coke from it too, which is interesting because we're already making coke from coal. So this potentially could completely replace coal processing because we need that coke for other things. But nonetheless, we'll hit that now and we'll do the math later. But the other thing that you can do with nickel is you can process that natural gas with water and make ethanol. It doesn't increase the fuel value any. However, it does reduce the fuel pollution. So what this means is you can take 100% of your oil processing output and turn it into ethanol, and you will have no byproducts, assuming you have the nickel to go with it. So of course, that is certainly good. And then you would take that full output, and if we had platinum, we could turn ethanol into plastic bars. We don't currently, but we do have nickel, and we could turn nickel into rubber, which means we won't actually have to grow the rubber trees anymore. But that's probably going to be a relatively small thing, so let's wait until we have platinum before we research this. So this will unlock bitumen upgrading, which is fantastic because it allows us to turn the bitumen and some petroleum into diluted bitumen. And then you could take that and add water, and you can turn it into oil products. It'll mostly be petroleum, which isn't a bad thing. And it's interesting that these two recipes are 125% pollution. So this is a very dirty process right here. And I guess the large amount of petroleum you get out of this is in part because what you had to put into it, because that would have required 60 petroleum to go into this process, and you get 70 back. So actually, when you take that out, it mostly produces heavy oil. It's not a petroleum generator. But that's probably a lot better use of bitumen. We could, of course, calculate it, but I am almost certain that that is a better use of it than turning it into the graphitic coke. So, of course, we'll hit that. We could take the research further, but that does require the platinum, so there's not much use in going that far yet. And we want to make sure this is ready to copy. And actually, I put a gas furnace here, but we really don't need one at all, because all of these furnaces will just change their recipe based on what the input is. So we can just pick that up and just plop it down on the next line here. So that means the nickel ingots, the copper ingots, and the scrap all has somewhere to go. It will get sent to where it needs to. One other thing I think I might want to change are these on and off numbers. But if you notice when we ran it, it basically got all the way up to about 500 before it shut off. And I think that's because there's essentially about a 500 ore buffer through this whole process before the hot water shut off and where it actually got here. So because of that buffer, it means that this number could actually be a lot lower. And I actually think that maybe 1 stack would be enough. So we can set this to just be 25. So once it gets below 25, it will turn on. Let's make a new recipe here. I'm guessing it's probably going to take quite a while, which makes me think that we want to place this sooner rather than later. And it looks like it has its own complement of roboports, so this should be properly connected. We'll have to change some of these pipes around, but easy enough to do. We definitely want to get this going now. It's definitely our biggest recipe to date here. We want to line it up with the top one, and wow, that's close. Looks like there are some cliffs out here. So many trees. Well, I appreciate that this thing is so fast. And it's fantastic that this just barely fits. And the wires reach and everything. Cliff's in the way. There we go. We have some items in our inventory, so I guess we'll help out. And our batteries drain extremely quickly now. Almost to the point where we kind of need more of them. But the exoskeletons are so nice to have. Yeah, very quickly that nickel is getting filled up. And that's going to kind of happen. That those secondary resources are going to be kind of an issue for quite some time until you start using them in large quantities. So in the beginning here, you really need to have alternate methods to make sure you don't get overloaded. Okay, let's set construction robots to 500 now. And now we have maxed out on nickel. Oh, we do need a radar. Oh, that's the really annoying spot. I think I just need to put a radar in there. I was going to say that we're basically going to start maxing out on nickel now if we don't start using it for stuff. Okay, well, I guess we'll just let this keep building. Really, the thing we're kind of waiting on are basically all of those furnaces. We'll almost certainly have enough nickel for this. So now what we need to do is calculate what is the maximum amount of petroleum we might have. And you see all of the generators are going. Basically, instead of dumping extra petroleum into the generators, we should dump it into natural gas, and then that coke will be available for other processes. And in fact, we could even make this our primary coke producer and not even make it from coal anymore. That is certainly a possibility. We'll do that math later when we get to coal liquefaction. But for now, we need to do another line for the worst case scenario of what happens if we have too much petroleum. And we already did the math here, where it would be 166.7. So we go in here, switch it to input. Wonder if we knock it down, is that going to let us? Yeah, 166.7. Does that work? Okay, so I guess you can't do it on the top line, at least if you switch it to input. It has to be output only. However, if you knock it down, then you can actually set it as an input. So we're figuring this out one at a time here. And we really only need those 2 modules for 13 machines. And that's actually a not insubstantial amount of coke that this is going to make. Potentially too much, so we probably still want to leave those generators there just in case it overloads. But that will create a ton of natural gas. And we don't really have much room here. It's either to the right or to the left. And actually to the right isn't terrible. And to the left kind of isn't terrible either. How about let's just go to the right. This isn't quite completely covered. Whoa, there's like tiny little bits of coal there. Gotta get all this covered. That'll leave us a little bit of room. Something like that. Would that copy? Certainly. Hopefully that's all of it. I think so. Factory robots are going to help. For better or for worse, I don't know if I want them to. Well, one thing that can help when you're doing construction projects like this is just to leave a storage chest right nearby that's hopefully inside the zone. And it wasn't. So that way if they're going to dump stuff, it'll be really nearby. Okay, so we've got our line of machines. Couple spaces. 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. And it looks like it'll be a reasonable length. Man, this thing fills up quickly. Definitely thinking we should pave the factory with robots. But it takes so much work for them to do that. Anyway, one more in there. Hopefully that's all of them. Looks like it. It's gonna be a really long way for these pellets to go. Also a lot of steam. Well, we don't really need to be making steam from iron boilers anymore. I'm not sure if there's any difference to using electrics, but I guess we can kind of test this. Well, if it linked, it doesn't seem like it wants to. So I don't think we're gonna be able to test it with Hellmod. But nonetheless, using electric boilers would be infinitely more useful than having to send really long fuel lines like this. Let's just plop one in here and see. Oh, that's a new sound. Well, it doesn't even really say, but that seems to know. It is slower. Let's just use this pipe here. Luckily, we don't have to put anything into these. So it can just be one long line. But that is certainly dense. And there they go, probably using an enormous amount of power. Oh yeah, that's a huge electrical demand on our factory. But it's cool seeing the lights on them, so at least you see how hard they're all working. And then this will be one giant belt. I kind of don't want to pick it up by hand. I mean, we have robots, so I am glad to get rid of this thing. Basically, anytime we find junk in our inventory or in the factory's inventory, then we'll know that is something that needs to be placed somewhere convenient. Well, for now, I want to move this up so it will stop dumping petroleum in this way, but we want the logic to be the same. So we'll do that by just picking up the whole thing. We'll have to drop it in here somewhere. Somewhere that's kind of out of the way, so we'll do that. So the logic is completely the same. So we hook it up, and we've got no signals because it's looking for, are we low on light oil, are we low on heavy oil, or are we low on natural gas? If any of those conditions are true, it sends the signal through, and then we also need to send that signal to the input of that side, and it's looking, are we above 20,000 of petroleum? If so, signals go through, and it's trying to send those in. And this is just looking for a green signal. But there are no problems right now, so it's not trying to turn anything on. So one thing we need to check for is how many pellets do we need? About 3 per second. And is that a lot? There's our nickel and platinum pellets. It is absolutely not a lot. And then we somehow have to get the ingots all the way down here. And it's so busy here, I really don't want to come through here, so we probably should do this instead. Maybe come along our giant belt bus here. And in doing so, we're going to make lots of extra space for stuff. And it was starting to clog up a little bit here. And also, it'll be an output of the coke. Because this is a better way of making coke than what we're doing, we definitely want to shoot it in the backside here. And that'll give it priority over the way we're making it currently. Well, the nickel made it. Don't really have any processing to do yet. Oh yeah, and of course, I forgot, we need to unstack these. Stackers work best with loaders and unloaders, but because the amount that we're stacking and unstacking here is so limited, we can just use regular inserters because the output rate is so low. And it looks like it's already starting because it had a little bit in the system, but that's fine. Well, we need to get this set up for the next resource. So how about we do it for tin? Washing tin will produce some lead. So we just need to go through here and try to find all of the things related to it. We have to remember, switch that to tin, switch that to lead, tin ingots, lead ingots, tin scrap, and actually we need another one of these for lead scrap. Switch each one of these to tin. The first number is going to be stacked tin ingots. Second number is stacked lead ingots. And of course, crushed tin ore, regular tin ore. This logic will be set for the rare resource, which will be the lead. This one is the common resource of tin. For now, we'll just use an unloader right there to get rid of it all. So this is going to give us both stone products and the sulfur. There's a couple of places we could dump it. Ideally, we don't want to just send it all the way across the factory if we can avoid it. And one place that uses a ton of it is simply right here at glass. I mean, it is using it. We could also put it into landfill too. We'll just have to see. So then the sulfur is going to have to come all the way down here. Basically that belt we pulled out, time to put it back in. Man, it's going to go a long way. And it kind of needs to go into the back of this. So hopefully we don't have to move this belt later. We probably will. Well, it's trying to handle all of that, but let's see, at full blast, how much would these make? 0.5 of each. And does this have any hope of doing 0.5? Unfortunately, no. As nifty as this was, it was probably kind of pointless. Let's keep this going here. So all of the signals will be connected, just so we have them on our circuit HUD. And definitely natural gas got really low. So let's go down there and see if it all works. So it super duper wants to go. So hooking it in, it's all quickly running, dropping the petroleum down, which is leaving room for everything else to run, which of course will create more natural gas. And yeah, it's actually producing it rather quickly and making lots of coke in the process. So seems good. We definitely could insert those items into making concrete here. It's gonna be weird, but it has to go down here. And then in the back for the silica. Okay, this all made it here. So that goes in to get priority. And that should get rid of the rest of the backup. And since we're so low, I guess we need another patch. We're probably not actually going to be able to get the full amount out of this. The 30 per second, which is fine. I guess we'll just let both sides kind of run, since that one is so close to running out anyway. And this isn't going to run for very long, at least at full blast, because there's just not going to be very much tin, but we do know it works. Hopefully it works long enough to see if this logic connects, because it would be nice to get a full speed test, so maybe we should wait for all this ore to back up. Out of fuel, huh? That shouldn't be the case. Oh, it looks like something got disconnected down there. Well, let's follow the pipe. Ah, well, that's easy. Looks like it just kind of got moved around. So there it goes again. And it looks like we're about built up on the tin here. And this isn't moving forward because we're not making any concrete anymore. So that tells me we probably do want to have a buffer chest in here. Maybe like right there. And we do have our 500 construction bots, so I kind of want to just start placing a bunch of concrete and letting them just work really hard. So let's make another plan. This is just going to be the bulk concrete plan. That's all it is. And then we need to make sure we don't paste this anywhere where there's not coverage, but actually so much of the factory is covered now that there's really not going to be very many dead spaces. So that'll be certainly a lot of it to get them started. And we might not be fully covering everywhere, but we can look for empty spaces later. But they also need somewhere to put that other concrete. So it's probably going to be right here. I mean, we could use this concrete for other things, but since we're automating it at this point, we might as well just crush it away. And that does make concrete scrap, which is a new thing we will have to handle eventually. But at least now the robots are busy, easily handling what we are creating. Definitely our system is working here. We are no longer burning away because it has been disconnected. Any of that petroleum. It is fully being utilized in other ways. Seems good. So in goes the tin. And since we have no tin at all, it is defaulting to the less effective way of making tin because it assumes there is a problem. Under normal circumstances, there would be if we got to this point. And of course, some of it does kind of skip by, but that's fine. It's basically doing what it needs to here because it gets to here and then is stopped. So we're starting to get stacked ingots. And there we go. The number went above 25, which means now the more efficient method using the washing is getting priority. And that will go until we have 25 of the lead. And there we go. You can see how quickly this number goes up, even though we shut it down the second it got above 25, because there is quite a buffer in there. Well, it all seems to be working. Just waiting for that lead to make it through, and it's really hard to see, but it's in there. It is filling up the belts. And we filled up to 25, which means now the water temperature has dropped, and it's washing it in the way that produces a lot less lead. Of course, it still has to make it through all these machines, and you can see even though we shut it down at 25, the number is still rapidly going up just because of the big buffer. But that is about as close as we can get it, really. It's not going to be perfect. It's more of an approximation, but seems to be working. And robots are going nuts on the concrete, and the 500 robots is seemingly enough for what we need here. So we have lead now, which does open up a new path, a good one, and a required one, of course. If we do lead and steel and sulfuric acid, we can make a high capacity battery. And that high capacity battery now has a fuel value of 20 megajoules, so it holds a lot. And also it gives us 125% vehicle acceleration and 110% vehicle top speed. So this is essentially our highest performance fuel item now. However, there will be better fuel items that are coming down the chain. It's a little ways away, but for example, we could take natural gas and create a liquid natural gas canister, which also has the same acceleration and top speed, but 128 megajoules in it. So we could switch all of our vehicles over to electric and get slightly higher performance out of it, but the annoyance of delivering batteries everywhere doesn't really sound worth it, so I'm probably going to skip this for now. However, also note that the percent of getting your battery back is now 99%, so they wear out less often. And you get the advanced battery charger and generator as well, because they are different types of batteries. And then in doing that, we now finally get access to the accumulator, which looks like it's much higher performance than the vanilla one, and it goes up to 60 megajoules. And with accumulators, we'll be able to have advanced logic for all of our power generation items, and they will all run more efficiently, rather than just kind of all fighting. And that's going to drain our lead very fast, but we'll do it. And once we have accumulators, we'll be able to do roboports. The real ones this time. But we'll save that because we'll probably have a lot of accumulators to build, and we'll probably want to get through that first. However, now that we'll have accumulators, we can do geothermal power. So we use this heat exchanger here, and it will take polluted steam and water and turn it into polluted water and steam. Or you can also use the same process to heat water if that's what you want. But we'll probably want it for power, and now that we'll have accumulators, we'll be able to give this priority over everything else in the factory so it doesn't have to fight, and that's kind of why I wanted to wait on that one. So now we have a use for our lead. Of course, we'll also want to plug in our other ingots as well, and this is getting increasingly messy, but what can you do? So now we have a bunch of stuff that we don't need. This has been here a long time. It's nice to get rid of it though. And well, we need to build another one, and that process takes forever, so we probably want to get that started sooner rather than later. If we put these better power poles in here, they will reach the whole way. And let's just do a new train track. Whoops. I didn't unstack the ingots there though, and in fact, I didn't unstack them anywhere. So, whoops. Well, that's going to be a huge mess. I think that gets the rails all connected and out of the way. Well, the trains are running, so it must have worked. Unfortunately, they still managed to get in here somehow. Well, first thing we need to do is switch over our battery production here. And looking at the differences of these batteries, it goes from 5 megajoules to 20. So for our personal inventory, it's a huge improvement. And the recipe is fairly similar, it's just it needs to have lead now. However, we are using batteries for the production of these robots and also other items, so this probably has to stay here. However, the difference is that we don't actually need to request them anymore. So we'll say charged batteries is 0, regular high capacity batteries 0, and the charged ones, we want a stack of them. And these can definitely go anywhere, and it's actually quite straightforward. I guess we don't have junction boxes in our inventory right now, but we'll survive if we only need to build one of these. So getting lead here is going to be annoying, but it can be done. Our mini bus is getting less mini by the day, and that can go in. And we probably don't need this here anymore, because clearly we've been making our ethanol just fine without having to worry about the charcoal. That said, though, we do need to get wood here for train tracks, but it seems to be pretty low priority right now, so I don't think we need to worry about it. Which means our factory is no longer going to operate on charcoal in any way. It's basically just coke. So in comes the lead. Let's see if this works. Certainly seems to, and actually our power is too low. That must be using a ton of it. And it looks like it's basically all robots. Wow, 50 megawatts of robots. Well, I guess that makes sense because they're like moving a bunch of ingots and stuff from our inventory, so we need those accumulators to have some kind of burst capacity here. I'm going to give it a second. I think it will catch up on its own once the robots are done with all these deliveries. So we've got our supply of batteries now. It does take a little while for them to charge because there's so much power in them, but it is nice that we have a huge storage capacity now. Lead hasn't backed up yet, but it's certainly available, and nickel is starting to back up again. Not that there's much we can really do about that until we start using it, and we're basically using it for everything we have it available for, short of just burning natural gas for power, which is a possibility, but research is done there. Before we do that, it would be nice to have accumulators, which requires a lot of random stuff, and it does require batteries as well. So it's nice that they're here, because we definitely need all these batteries for the accumulators. It needs EM coils, which are actually kind of close, thankfully, and the junction boxes. Not even sure if we're making those. We are. It's all the way out here. Do we send it all the way back? Probably not. It's kind of an annoying thing to make, but we have already made it, and I so desperately want it to fit in here. But I think we're just going to have to do a giant long belt. And it doesn't really run into that much stuff. It's just kind of messy. And probably just the one assembler for this. It does need small steel frames, though. Hopefully there's enough room for this. I mean, there is, but actually getting the items in there, less so. There. I think we've got it. And we can put a wooden pallet in there for buffer. And then, of course, we need somewhere for the accumulators to go. And calm down, robots. That is not somewhere you can use. Let's make like 50 of them. And there we go. We have accumulators, and they hold a lot of power. To set up priority with all of our power methods, we basically need to find them all, and then determine which ones are most important and which ones are least important. And we can search for entity to get a quick idea of what we're looking at here. Where we have our steam engines from our steam derrick, which are very high priority. They should essentially always run because it's free power. And then this is the old faithful backup, which really only turns on at the last moment to keep them from being completely empty. So we have two methods there. And then petrochem, one is the ethanol, and then the other is the byproducts from processing our oil. However, these will probably never run anymore. So I kind of want to go down there and disable it because we can turn all extra oil products into this natural gas and then into ethanol. So really, burning ethanol is the only method that we're actually going to need now. So I do want to disconnect this here, just to make sure that this all works while being disconnected, because it essentially is now. And yeah, there's no room for robots. They're all stuck kind of waiting around. And that's actually bad because it's all construction robots, but whatever. I think I was a little too aggressive when it came to placing concrete, so we have to wait for all this to get cleared out first. And it is working on it. Who knows how many accumulators we should start with, but we do have substations now, and we have this little space out here, so how about let's just use it. We don't have to worry about using solar panels or anything, so actually, we don't need to do anything special at all. These will all just fit perfectly, and we don't have to worry about stacking things in there. We just have a perfectly dense collection of accumulators. Alright, let's connect it all in here. And there we go. Everything's running at full blast, but We finally have some energy storage. So we had 3 essentially. Ethanol, the steam, that's free, and also our Old Faithful of just burning anything. Also, we are going to be able to do our geothermal plant soon, so that's essentially another power source. Although it's also good, like this steam here. So we probably want to treat them equally because they're both infinite resources. So how about in that case, the steam will always run, and then basically it's just ethanol that we need to worry about. And how about that runs if we get below 75% accumulator, and then 50% accumulator for the steam engines. And for this we need an SR latch. We don't have to use one, but if you just use a standard combinator, it'll be clicking the power on and off constantly, and it'll be like a really hard to see sawtooth pattern. So it'll be a lot easier if you do a set reset latch. So for this to work, first we need to have the status of the accumulators, and it could be any of them, so you can just pick one of them and just say that's the one we're going to set this on. So off to the side here, we need some deciders, and we'll have this constant combinator as well so we can test it. So first we have the 2 with the input, and the accumulator signal will be A. So let's just say A is 100%, and let's hook this up to that so it looks a little cleaner. So both of these are getting A. First is the set latch. This is what sets it to turn on. So it's looking at A, and once A gets below whatever the on point is, in this case it'll be 75%, so we'll say 75 there. And if so, it'll output an S for set. And right now it's not outputting anything because the accumulators are at 100%, or at least our test signal is. But then what happens when that amount gets higher? Whatever the point to which it turns off will be. Let's say 5% higher. And if it gets above 80%, it'll set the reset signal. And you can see right now it's sending an R. And if we drop this number down, well, to 0, it's now sending the set signal. So we need another one. And the way the SR latch works is so long as S is more than R, so in other words, the set signal is greater than the reset signal, output the set signal. So we take our signals and put them in there, but this also needs to be a memory cell. So we'll cross the input and the output. This way, if the set signal exists, it will stay there even if A is now above 75. So it drops below 75, it sends a set signal, and because this is a memory cell, because it's going between the input and outputs, it will hold on to the set signal until A gets above 80, and it sends the reset signal, and then S and R will be equal to each other, and S will not be greater, which means it will no longer send the set signal. And we can kind of test this again by saying what happens if the level drops too low. You can see that the output is now an S. And let's say it gets to 75%. It's still an S. 78%, it's still an S. And then 81%, the S is gone. Now it's the reset. And finally, we need a power switch, and this is what's actually going to turn on and off the power generation method. This one is looking for the set signal. It simply has to be greater than 0. So to test it, it drops to say 70. It connects. Goes to 75. Still connected. 78. Still connected. 80. Still connected. About 83. It disconnects. And that's basically how a set reset latch works. And of course it's always going to be on now because there's no input signal. So let's put it to use. You do have to be careful where you place this because you don't want the power poles to kind of cross each other. How about we actually put it like right here? And then let's get the A signal coming through here. So there we go, it's grabbing the A. And it would be nice to have that signal up here. I guess we could. We'll just throw it on the same wire as oil processing. And now it'll be there. I guess we could put it somewhere else, but for now, it'll be useful. So now we'll take the power wire, hook it up there, also hook it up there, and they're going to keep running because they just are. but they're their own network now, and that's set up. So if we look at our steam engines here, those are also running, so those need to be disconnected and set properly. Okay, and like the other setup, this one needs to be very carefully connected, where not only do we have to concern ourselves with that wire connection, but also the inserters need to be on their own thing too. So the power switch would go right in here, and then we get this connected, and now it's off, but our numbers are different. We want to let this get down to 50%, and then up to 55 before it gets reset. So now you see the A number is going down very quickly because our accumulators are too small, but then it gets below 75, and then all of these petrochem generators are now running at full blast. They don't have to fight with anything, and they are barely holding it on. And then once they get above 80, you'll see it click off, and there it goes, and A drops very rapidly. So when you look at the power graph, now we have these cool up downs for the different power generation methods, and we can also follow them to see what's going on. There is an additional logic in here where we have to have at least 80% of our ethanol before it'll actually be available for these generators. But I'm thinking that's probably too much. I don't think we need to have that quantity of the ethanol on hand. And just as a side note, because the accumulators always have room in them, it means that our steam engines are now always going to run. And since each one of these can consume 30 a second, and this one at full blast could do basically almost double that, we probably don't need to have this last set of engines in here. That just those will work when it's at full power. We just about have all of that concrete placed. And that's the end of this episode. On the next one, we're going to continue to upgrade our factory with resources that we get from ore washing. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.